One of the best moments in all of Warhammer is when the War Master Horus Lupercal flays the face right off the biggest douche in the setting, Arabus. And while that is extremely satisfying for us as fans, it set the stage for something that literally makes the Dark Apostle even worse. Because Erebus gets a new face, and this one is actually in many ways an upgrade. Now, if you've read the Horus Heresy short story collection Era of Ruin, then you'll know that even when you think Erebus just can't get any worse, that he can't cross another line and advance to a higher level of assholism, he will surprise you. So seeing him recover from his flaying, which had given me that warm fuzzy feeling of schadenfreude, reminds me that this one is a horror story. So in this video I will read the whole short story that this happens in and then give my thoughts afterwards. There's a horror story theme going on, but also a bit of a Greek mythology style hero's journey. So put on your black robes and grab your ritual knife. This one is a deep dive into the depravity that is chaos, and worse, Erebus. Visage by Rich McCormick. The skull glistened in the gloom of the apothecarian. White bone protruded from red meat, high cheekbones and a jutting chin forming islands amidst the sea of gore. Once these islands had been hidden by tanned skin, itself decorated with a spidery scrawl of tattoos. But that skin had been roughly flayed from the flesh beneath by Horus Lupercal, and lay now on the cold decking of the War Master's flagship. Arabus, the first chaplain of the Wordbearers Legion, Dark Apostle of the Pantheon, and the sufferer of Horus's punishment, was unconscious. So the devices attached to his body reported, anyway. But even as his acolytes and assistants worked to stabilize the massive space marine, his lidless eyes swiveled in their sockets, fixing the mortals with frenzied glares. Primary heart rate spiking, a hooded figure reported. Administering sedative, the lead chirurgeon intoned in response. His voice belied his age. He was young, having risen through the clandestine ranks of the Wordbearers Medicae serfs before being handpicked by Arabus himself to join his surgical staff. The first chaplain did not trust his legion's own apothecaries as a rule, expecting, with just cause, that they may take any opportunity to kill him. Secondary heart rate spiking, the hooded figure intoned again, with the cadence of a call to prayer. That doesn't make sense, the lead chirurgeon said. Acolyte Tornal, prepare a second. The rest of the sentence died in his throat as a massive hand took his neck in a vice grip. He followed the muscular arm up and found himself staring into the bloodshot eyeballs of a now very much awake Arabus. My lord, the chirurgeon managed through a constricted windpipe. I am pleased to see you have stabilized, he squawked, an attempt at a breath, as his face reddened to the color of the 17th Legion's armor. Please, rest, that we may begin the process of repairing your wounds. Arabus's lipless mouth was locked in a rictus grin as he found the situation perversely amusing. No time, the Dark Apostle said, tendons in his cheeks visible as they worked his mouth and tongue. The athame leaves its mark on those it touches. He raised the dagger, still clutched in his left hand, its edge hissing gently even now with its master's own blood. It is simple, chirurgeon. I need a new face, Arabus said, as he pulled the man closer to the ruined mask of his own. The chirurgeon could smell the Dark Apostle's breath, hot and rancid, even over the metallic stench of blood. I will take yours, Arabus growled. But my lord, the chirurgeon stammered, falling backwards as Arabus loosened his grip on his neck. He rubbed at his throat, his voice still hoarse. I fear such a procedure would kill me. Then you must give thanks to the gods directly, Arabus said conversationally to the cowering man as he sat up on the stone slab. That your sacrifice may be in my name. The chirurgeon screamed as his fellows grabbed him from behind, restraining his arms and binding his kicking legs with the length of surgical hose. They pinned the man to the floor of the apothecarian, and Arabus heard the wet sounds of sharp metal on human flesh. The shrieks of panic turned into gurgles of agony, and when the figures reappeared, they held a scrap of olive-brown skin, raising it aloft like a hunting trophy. Arabus examined it. It lacked the full range of intricate tattoos that had decorated his own face, but he could address that later. He could feel the athame's effects coursing through his body, a grave cold touch flash freezing his nerve endings as it slowly severed his physical connection to reality. The mutilation was symbolic as well as agonizing. Stripped of his face, he was stripped also of its web of warding tattoos. Between the Athame's wounds and the constant attention of the Neverborn that he had attracted, Erebus knew enough of the diabolic to understand that waiting much longer without those wards would put his life in jeopardy. This solution would not last. A mortal's face was not only physically smaller than a Space Marine's, but also lacked the dense web of blood vessels. But Arabus had ensured that his acolytes were all marked with the same basic warding tattoos that he had been. The face would buy him the time to craft a more fitting solution. Perhaps he could even coerce Fabius to help him, he thought. The chief apothecary of the Third was a skilled flesh crafter. "Hurry," the Dark Apostle said, as he repositioned himself on the slab. The chirurgeons loomed over him. Their own faces were largely hidden, hooded by cowls and covered by masks, but he could see the fear in their eyes. He saw himself reflected in the lenses of their ocular implants, a visage from human nightmares, and he laughed. He was still laughing as the chirurgeons placed the new face, still warm from its previous owner, onto his mutilated skull. Bloody skin covered his eyes for a moment, a forced blink that marked Erebus's first since Horus had meted out his punishment. But the apothecarian came into focus a moment later as the chirurgeons brought the scrap of skin into alignment. Needles kissed skin, their burrowing tips bringing fresh pricks of pain to the abused flesh. Gossamer thin thread tied the new skin in place, experts' hands blessing the sutures in the name of the gods as they were being made. For a moment, as the last needle left his body, there was no pain. Arabus allowed his hand to move to his new face and touched its skin. It was too tight, already splitting along lines of pressure, the capillaries and blood vessels straining and bursting. Arabus smiled, or tried to. His new lips could not move. "Behold," he said, "the new face of your..." Erebus screamed as his face caught fire. Black flames sparked under the new skin, turning fat and flesh into ash in an instant, a total rejection of the unwilling donor's gift. The Dark Apostle clawed at his skull, tearing stitches and skin alike as he fought to free himself from the torture. "Too late!" Erebus howled, and he ran from the agony, springing from the stone slab and staggering out of the apothecarian, still scraping with wild fingers at his flaming skull. "Master!" the chirurgeon called after him. The others stood still, their robes splashed with gore, too stunned by the horrific scene to know what to do. Erebus staggered through the halls of his own ship, making for his chambers. There was only one option remaining to the first chaplain. Bloody handprints daubed the walls, their rich redness energizing the Colchizian script carved into every wall and fresco. The font was ancient, a Colchizian relic of the Old Faith. The blood it contained was old too, but it was liquid still, its unique properties sparing it from congealing over the years. It was powerful, this blood. It represented the profits of treachery, having been collected from the first loyalist to die on the blighted world of Istvan III. Arabus looked into the depths and saw his face reflected in its glossy surface. This was not the screaming skull he wore in the physical plane, but a countenance split in four, just as he had seen in the cracked mirror as a child on Colchis. The Pantheon represented through him. He carried out their will. He was their hand of destiny, and they, in turn, would help him. Speaking words of beseechment and protection, Erebus submerged his face into the blood, and all became red. Red faded to black. For the first time since his mutilation, Erebus was engulfed by blessed darkness. He savored it for a time, the cleansing balm of absolution, until his reverie was interrupted by a pinprick of light. One at first, bright and blue, it shone like a star, then another, and another, until the blackness was scattered by tiny lights like a million shining eyes. They blinked. They were watching him. He hung in the blackness, suspended, the pain of his ruined face forgotten, and asked the question, "What do you want from me?" The answer was spoken by a million throats at once, in languages both dead and yet to be. The words ran backwards and forwards, their utterance guttural, shrill, and everything in between. Still, he understood their meaning. "Choose your path," the eyes said. Possibility spread out in front of him like a web. The eye lights joined now by thin strands of fate and happenstance. They connected across time and space, through reality and unreality, offering a billion versions of things to come. Arabus had but to follow these threads to see that which he desired most. You seek to contain me in a trap of my own making. I know this trick, demon. I have walked such paths many times before with others of your kind, Arabus said. No trick, the voices chorused in return. A path to what might be, a path to what has come. We can show you the possibilities, but you must make the choice. You are the instrument. Entertain me then. How will I play your game? Arabus asked. The answer was physical. Pain racked his body as bones grew and muscle ripped. His ribs cracked and his skin tore, and from his shoulder blades great wings pushed forth. Erebus shook the gore and ichor from his new wings, allowing the light of the eyes to warm them. He felt his own blood pumping through their veins until he could unfurl them, wide and powerful. He felt as if he were Sanguinius, an angel from legend, but where the Primarch of the Blood Angels bore wings of the purest white, Erebus's new limbs writhed with the colors of the cosmos. Bolts and sparks of blues and greens coruscated along their length, illuminating a patchwork of pink-brown membranes and feathers colored yellow and orange. Liquid gold flowed between the feathers, solidifying to form arcane symbols and runes, before melting again to form new shapes that even Arabus, with his knowledge of the diabolic, did not recognize. Choose your path, the eyes said again. And so he flew on avian wings towards the lights. Arabus made for a reddish speck and found his feet amidst the sand of an endless desert. Oppressive heat beat down on his shaven head, signaling the height of long noon. You know this place, the eyes said. Of course I recognize Colchis, Arabus replied. The world of my birth. He had no lips to shape the words, but the voice came as a youth's, high and soft. It was his own voice, he realized, untainted by the genetic and surgical manipulations that had turned him into one of the Emperor's warriors. He looked down at his hands and saw them small and weak, his skin not yet marked with the ink that would cover his physical form. They were still powerful, though, these hands. He saw them clenched tight around a garrote, the taut wire wrapped around the neck of another youth. He was Erebus, this boy, the Erebus from whom he would take his name, and he was dying. As the brightness faded from his eyes, his arms slackened and he slumped to the ground. With his dying breath, he passed his name to his killer, and Erebus stood on the sands of his home world. Your choice, the eyes said. Your first, to set you on your path. Not my first, Erebus sneered. The desert fell away and he returned to the void. Take your next step, instrument, the eyes instructed. Erebus moved through the galaxy of possibilities. He was guided by his own certainty. He found himself on the Intrex world of Zenobia, watched as he stole the anatheme blade from the planet's Hall of Devices, continuing a chain of events set in motion centuries before. Davin followed, and Horus's wounding, before Erebus found himself above the familiar orb of Istvan III. The world rippled as the virus bombs bloomed against the surface, billions of souls meeting their doom at his whim. Erebus reveled in these experiences as he moved through time and space, each one a triumph of his knowledge and forethought. Emboldened by his successes, he flew towards another light. This one shone with a sickly luminosity, and as he neared it, it pulsed with unholy sound. Cygnus Prime, the site of his greatest failure. As Sanguinius thwarted carefully laid plans to bring the Blood Angels under Horus's banner, he watched the great bloodthirster, Kabanda, give its offer to the Primarch, and saw the skeins of possibility spool out into far futures where Sanguinius stood side by side with his brothers against the anathema, loyalist blood on his hands, rage held high in his heart. Then he saw Sanguinius make his choice, and saw 100,000 threads of possibility cut. The red eye at the center of the web dimmed, and Arabus was left standing in front of his lord, as Horus took Erebus's own athame in his massive hand. The cursed blade cut deep into the meat of his face, severing muscle and scraping the bone of his skull as he was flayed once more. He gasped as the pain raked his nerves again. Even a ghost of the sensation was agony, but in a moment it was gone, and he floated once more in the black. Why show me this, demon? Erebus snapped. I know all I need to of Sanguinius and his blood-crazed sons, and I have welcomed my chastisement. The brightness of the eyes dimmed for a moment, as if winking, and a trilling laugh carried through the impossibility. You lie, the demon said. Then we are alike, Arabus said. It matters not, this is the past. Teach me of what is yet to come. All has happened already. All is yet to come, the eyes said. If that were true, then you would not bring me to this place. No, demon, you need me. Your master and his cousins in the Pantheon, they need me. Guide me if you would, that I may continue my work. We show you the paths. You must walk them. Then move out of my way. And so Erebus flew, guided by sensation and the whims of the warp. He saw more failures, worlds where Dorn had confined Perturabo in an impossible prison, where the lion had hunted and slain the pathetic figure of the Night Haunter, where the Khan and his sons had ridden down Mortarion and his stubborn Death Guard, cleansing the galaxy of their fetid stench, and where Fulgrim's children had been scattered to the winds, their egotism shattering their legion before they could bring their forces to muster. Erebus wept as he saw these realities play out, tears of blood falling down his ruined face as Horus struck down Lorgar himself. This is not right, Erebus whispered, unsure of his purpose for the first time in his living memory. The eyes heard him. You are the instrument, the demon said. Only you can change this. Finally, Arabus reached the star at the center of the web. It was red no more, shining now with a golden hue, its light cold and unwelcoming. He beat his wings, tried to fly away, but the light grew in size until it became a sun, dragging him towards its mass with its gravitational pull. It swelled until it blotted out all other lights in the galaxy, until it subsumed all other gods in the cosmos, for that was what it was, a god. The only god to remain. He tried to shield his eyes as he fell into the terrible sun, but his flayed skull had no eyelids to close, and the light shone through the skin and muscle of his hands, illuminating the bones beneath. The cold light scorched the exposed muscle and sinew of his mutilated face, and Erebus screamed in agony until he saw blackness once more. He breathed through the hole where his nose had been, and the lights returned. The web stretched out in front of him, its possibilities restored, its strands of fate uncut. Choose your path, the eyes said again. There's no way out, Arabus spat. This is no game at all, but a prison. There is but one path. You must walk it. How are you so sure? We have seen it. Then show it to me. We cannot guide, we can only see. Then lend me your eyes, Arabus asked. No, a million voices said. They screamed it and shouted it, bellowed it and whispered it, laughed it and sneered it and spat it. All except one, small, quiet, almost imperceptible in the cacophony of its peers, it spoke a different word. Yes, it said. If he had a face, Erebus's mouth would have slid into a predator's smile. See, demon, there is always another path, he said. He turned towards the sound and stared with lidless eyes into the darkness. A tiny light amongst the stars, faint and moving, had spoken the word. Arabus flew for it, riding on feathered wings that were not his own. A bird flying impossibly through the void, so small, so fragile against the infinite black. It beat its wings to escape, but Arabus knew the realm of demons better than any other alive, and he caught it easily. He cradled it in his tattooed hands. It was tiny in his grasp, like a child's toy, and he could feel its heartbeat, an irregular rhythm that was never the same twice. The bird looked at him with eyes like gemstones, one the purest blue, the other topaz yellow. A name. You cannot resist sharing your knowledge, Arabus said. So you hide it, somewhere small, somewhere hard to find. He stroked the bird's plumage with his thumb. But I am very good at finding things that others cannot, and I am very patient. I also know the most important question to ask. He asked that question now, and held the bird to his ear to hear its answer. It spoke a single word with a single voice as quiet as a wish. Arabus would have smiled had he possessed lips. Instead, with a skull's rictus grin, he snapped the bird's neck with 2 fingers and spoke the word it had told him. Darkness returned. Arabus opened his new eyes to see a changing web, and blinked eyelids of red raw skin as the strands of fate clarified. Millions of lines fell away, as just a handful brightened, connecting the points of light along a single pathway until it reached a point at the center of the web where the red eye burned like a supernova. He followed the path, laughing as he traveled. He was still laughing as the blazing eye burned away the feathers of his wings, and still laughing as he dived gratefully down towards the red eye at the center of the web, immersing himself totally in its roiling, bubbling sea of pure chaos. He was not alone in the sea. Squirming things palpitated at his skin, probing for information, for weakness. Tiny consciousnesses tickled his mind, tracing like fingers across his thoughts, while great masses swam past, pushing him aside as they migrated through the great ocean. Arabus opened new eyes and saw them all, impossible colors and obscene movement, a truth beyond mortal ken. The primordial truth. He was being watched, too, eyes fixed on him from across the aeons, and he felt his body lurch. The warmth of the warp dissipated, and he found himself high above a red world. Gravity pulled, and he fell like a meteor, spinning and burning towards the red ground. Skin charred and flaked away as he tore through the atmosphere, exposed muscle and bone burning in the fires of atmospheric entry. Agony filled his body, filled his senses, until everything was red. The red of fire, the red of pain, the red of the world beneath. Pain turned to fury, raw and as red as the planet beneath, and Erebus finally hit the ground. Red faded to black. Erebus awoke at the bottom of a crater blasted in the planet's surface by his violent arrival. The sky above hung low and heavy, the color of an old wound. His body had been restored to its transhuman vitality, but he was naked, feeling the sharp edges of the planet's surface digging at his bare skin. He had taken it for sand, initially, but the surface shifted and crunched under his weight as he drew himself over the lip of the crater that he had created. He bent to examine it in greater detail. Sifting a burned hand through the material, his fingers closed around a larger chunk and he brought it to his face. The unmistakable curve of a human eye socket looked back, its edges shattered by impact and worn by age. He stood on an unbroken carpet of shattered skulls that stretched from horizon to horizon. As Arabus looked to the north, he saw a red sun hanging low in the sky, burning through the clouds like a brazier, like the cyclopean eye of a beast. As Erebus watched, the beast coalesced, forming a mountain of darkness. Its brazier eyes were set into a wide skull, from which great horns rose, their points capped with burnished brass. Its lips curled downwards in a snarl, revealing blackened fangs like jutting mountains, fringed with foaming slaver. Its vast body was built from shadow, at once swirling and solid, wide and powerful on 4 gargantuan legs as massive as a continent. The beast watched him, and then it spoke. "Pathetic creature," it roared, in a voice like an earthquake. The skulls rattled on the ground as if in fear. "How dare you disturb my triumph?" Arabus fought his urge to flinch as scorching wind rolled across his abused body. "I seek your help," Erebus said, standing firm in the face of the beast. It pawed at the unstable ground, kicking up vast furrows of shattered bone, and snorted, launching clouds of dark ash from its nostrils. "Weakling!" it roared. "No help, there's no give, only take, only strength." "I walk the path," Erebus called in a bid to forestall the beast's anger. "Your master is my master." "Deceiver," the beast said. "You have the stink of the changer of the ways on you. You are no champion." Thunder rumbled, a sound like the drumbeat of a great army marching for war. Hooves met bone as the beast charged, smashing thousands of skulls underfoot with each stride. It lowered its head for a strike, and Erebus saw its brass-tipped horns were crusted with the dried blood of those it had speared before. He let it come, whispering words of protection and dark salvation in the moments before its massive head connected with his chest, delivering a blow that should have pulverized his rib cage. Arabus was launched skywards, tumbling once more through the thick clouds until he reached the apogee of his flight and fell back to the bone-choked earth, carving a furrow through the layer of skulls before coming to rest. Pain, as red and swollen as the low sun. The impact had shattered bone in his chest and limbs, tearing muscle and severing veins and arteries. Arabus had come so far, but he was still a space marine, and he could identify the scope of his injuries just as well as his brothers. He looked back from where he had come, and saw the beast had not given up its chase, already loping towards him, hooves once more shaking the ground. He saw something else, too. A glint of golden metal jutting from amongst the fragments of bone. He blinked away the agony and concentrated on the metal object as the beast came closer, pushing aside jawbones and eye sockets with a faltering arm until he revealed the top of a reinforced parapet. The metal was tarnished, but it was still strong, and it bore a relief that Arabus knew well, a two-headed eagle carved into the metal with perfect lines. "I know where we are," Arabus said, turning to face the beast as it struck him once more. Pain blossomed in his abused body, the impact enough to jolt his twin hearts and black out his new eyes for a moment. "This is Terra," Erebus wheezed, somehow drawing his broken body to its feet. He injected his voice with as much reverence as he could muster. "The mightiest world of the Imperium! To lay it low, what manner of beast did this?" The beast slowed but did not stop, raising its head to answer. "I did. I killed them all." "How did you kill so many?" Arabus asked, forcing wonder and awe into his tone. The beast turned, circling Arabus now, black smoke obscuring its demonic features as it snorted its replies. "I am the breaker of worlds. I killed and killed and killed again. I took their heads and I drank their blood, even as they begged for mercy." "Impossible," Arabus said. "No creature could kill so many." "What do you know of killing?" the beast roared, rearing up on its hind legs so that its maned head scraped the clouds above. "Puny soul, you beg for help from one as great as I, and then insult my strength?" It slammed its forelegs down, driving great hooves deep into the layer of skulls. The force of the impact almost knocked Arabus off his feet, and sharp fragments of broken bone kicked up by the demon slashed across his body, slicing lines of red across tattooed skin. Once more, the Dark Apostle did not shy away from the show of strength. "More than any of my kind," Arabus said. "I shepherded the champion on his path. I instructed him in the worship of your master. I am Arabus, and I set the stage for this." He raised his arms, gesturing at the landscape of bone. The beast snorted, sending plumes of smoke into the ashen sky. "A name from the distant past," it said, as its red eye bored into Arabus's broken form. "I knew this Arabus by another name, the Instrument." "I've been called such," Arabus said. "By whom? Another? Of my kind?" "In a manner of speaking," Arabus said, dodging the question. It would not end well for him to compare this beast to the minions of tzeentch. "This instrument is dead," the beast said. "Crushed as all such frail souls are, beneath the wheels of time and violence. And yet I stand before you. I wish to bring this reality to pass, to give you the skulls you seek. Help me." The beast harumphed, exhaling flame towards the heavens. "Ask, then, instrument. For this final battle, I will grant you this." "I ask you simply," Arabus said. "Join me." "Join you?" Thunder rumbled again as the demon laughed, harsh and cruel. "Stupid as well as feeble. I am here. All others have fallen. I am the conqueror. Why would I bind myself to you?" "Because I can offer you unseen battlefields to raise, new worlds to conquer, fresh blood to spill. I will give you billions, trillions of skulls to claim in your master's name. Why remain here amongst the ghosts of the slain?" "To hear their laments," the beast said. "Their cries, their pain, their deaths. I hear them every moment in endless devotion to the blood god." "I cannot hear them," Arabus answered truthfully. He could only hear the crunch of bone under the beast's massive hooves and the whip and whistle of the wind as it scoured this murdered world. "They sob and wail, howl and cry," the beast said. A harsh sound emanated from its throat, raw and wet. Arabus realized that it was laughter. "They beg for life, even now as I grind their dry bones into powder." "I should like to hear their cries," Arabus said, "so that I may tell the champion of your deeds and he may know his place." He raised a hand to placate the beast, carving subtle shapes into the sweltering air as he did so. "But I am sure that you do not have the power to grant such a boon." "Fool!" it roared. "I stand here astride this dead world, at the end of all things, and you think I am weak? Take my gift. Hear of my power from those that were destroyed by it. Sound washed over Arabus like a detonating bomb, the cacophony of 10 billion souls screaming their last. They were screaming for help, screaming in pain, screaming for their mothers and their fathers, screaming for their lovers and their children. An aeon had not dimmed their agony, and he bathed in it, allowing himself to be revitalized by it. Over it all, the skulls screamed one word. It was an ancient world, as old as the first civilizations and as dark as the soul. A name. Its syllables were not meant for flesh and blood tongues, but Erebus shaped them anyway, using all of his warpcraft not to lose control of his body or his mind as he spoke a name that had not been heard since the end of this world. The brazier eyes guttered, their lights fading in the hazy sky, until darkness fell across the sea of skulls. Their screams slowed to a chatter until they died completely. 10 billion ghosts finally laid to rest as darkness fell upon the corpse of Terra. For a time, the darkness was absolute. Then slowly, achingly slowly, it pooled, forming glossy lakes of blackness. They became mirrors, these lakes, and Erebus saw the ghost of a reflection on their surface. One face, or what purported to be a face, red and raw and grinning, his own, he realized. Although it looked more like the visage of one of the Neverborn than he remembered. He heard too, truly heard for the first time, with the sense that the blood god's minion had given him. As he listened, straining into the gloom, he heard a twinkling sound, soft at first. As he concentrated, it rose in pitch, in volume, in tempo, until it became the music of the apocalypse. It was the dirge of creation and destruction that scored material existence, and against it, he heard the whisper of 10 trillion voices promising him their secrets and their power if he would only give himself to them. Finally, as he shut out the sound, lest he lose his sanity altogether, he heard only the drip, drip, drip of blood. Blood into the pools of blackness, glossy blood, as rich and dark as wine. Candles reflected in its surface, their flames flickering seductively, and as Arabus stared into their light, he found himself standing in a room. It was a seat of power, this place, the central point of some ancient and forgotten empire. Its walls were constructed from blocks of sandstone upon which shapes were carved. The sinuous lines and rounded curves seemed to shift as Arabus watched them, writhing and gyrating to form obscene depictions and profane symbols. Their motion was mimicked by hundreds of pale figures who lay prostrate across the floor of the chamber. Erebus had taken them to be Xenos at first glance, such was their strangeness, but on further inspection he realized that they were humans, albeit members of the species starved of light and sustenance for millennia. Hunched and hairless, these pitiful beings thrashed and muled, raising stubby arms and training red-rimmed eyes towards the center of the room in states of apparent ecstasy or agony. At the center of the room, under a ceiling that was lost to the darkness above, sat a throne. Hewn from black obsidian, it offered a commanding view to its occupant, the object of the homunculized worship. A serpent, its scales pastel pink and pale purple, laid coiled in the seat of the throne. Its long tongue flicked from its mouth, tasting the perfumed air as it angled its head towards Arabus, and fixed him with a black-eyed stare. Its congregation whimpered as they too became aware of the interloper in the space. With a voice like a caress, the serpent spoke. "What do you desire, Arabus?" it asked. "You know my name?" Arabus said. "I know many secrets. I know that you took that name from another, leaving him to die, bleeding his red onto yellow sand. I know that you withhold truths, your truths, even from your father and his brothers, and I know that you have come here today for my assistance." The serpent uncoiled itself slowly, allowing ropes of its muscular body to slide from the seat of the throne. "But I do not ask why you have come. I ask what you desire." "I have no desires. I exist only to serve the will of the Pantheon." The serpent hissed, its approximation of a laugh. "All men desire, Erebus," it whispered. "Even those for whom fate has ordained their path." Darkness fell, suddenly, and when it lifted, the chamber had changed. Its walls had shifted from stone to metal, from warm yellow to cold green, stained and warped. The drip of blood on stone had been replaced by the menacing hum of cogitators and machinery, the sinuous symbols replaced by harsh runes, scratched into paint. The throne remained, but it too had changed. and the serpent could not be seen. Instead, it housed the bulk of a man. No, not a man. Taller, broader, stronger. A space marine. Larger still. A Primarch. Horus rose from his throne and strode over to Arabus. His armor as black as coal, his eyes burning with hatred. Those eyes stared down, imperious, contemptuous, and the War Master spoke. "Erebus," Horus said, his voice dripping with malice, "you return to disappoint me once more." "My lord," Arabus began, despite himself. He had never shared his brother's odd reaction to the presence of a Primarch, but he was still a Space Marine and he still felt a pull on his physical form from the facsimile of the War Master. "You should not have come here," Horus spat. "I do not need you. I never needed you." "But my lord," Arabus spluttered again, before he was forestalled. Horus raised his talon to Arabus's throat in response, his face contorting with fury. "Silly worm. I know what you will say, Arabus. You will say that you orchestrated my rise, that you alone can guide me as the champion of the Pantheon, that your story is as important as my own, perhaps more so, and that I should follow your lead." A cold metal finger traced along the line of his jugular as the golem spoke. His tone changed, mellifluous now, mocking. "And I say to you, how could that be true?" Red eyes searched Erebus's own, scouring his mind like flame. "You think you orchestrated my rise? You? A poor dust child from a backwater world? An itinerant preacher? A shepherd with no flock? What are you to a god such as me?" Horus seemed to glow, expanding in size until he almost doubled Arabus in height. "Your petty murders are nothing," Horus sneered, his voice lower now. "Your dabblings in the warp nothing more than parlor tricks, your movements of the pieces of war I see centuries in advance. I do not need you. I have never needed you. Your death will not be remarked upon in the glorious future to follow. My future." Horus turned his back on Arabus, white wolf pelt and skull trophies swaying as he spun, and looked out from the bridge of the vengeful spirit, across the gray orb that hung in front of him. As he watched, tiny blossoms of flame bloomed on the planet's surface. A similar flame sparked in Erebus's breast. It grew quickly, nurtured by memories of humiliation, censure, and punishment. He had given himself to the Pantheon, led their champion, their capricious, self-regarding champion, on the path, and this was his reward? Mutilation at the hands of a pawn? The flame moved from his breast, burning hot now in Erebus's hand. He looked down to see his athame in his palm, its polished black handle visibly throbbing with energy. He could feel its wants, its needs. It screamed to cut the War Master's throat, to plunge into his spine, to taste his warp-touched blood. It pulsed with shame and humiliation, with anger and vengeance. Arabus raised the weapon in a backhanded grip. Horus's Terminator plate was ancient, but the athame was a weapon of the warp, and it could tear through the thickest armor as if it was silk. Such a simple act, to bury the dagger in the War Master's spine. This time, unlike on Davin, there would be no recovery from the wound. "He is flawed," the serpent said from somewhere unseen. "You can kill him, take his place, become the true chosen. It would be so easy." Erebus blinked his new eyes, and the chamber shimmered. The metal replaced momentarily by stone. Stone as hard as his resolve. "I will usurp Horus," Arabus said. "The Pantheon had selected their champion, and I will see their will be done." Arabus threw the athame to the ground. It fell point first, and as it pierced the metal deck of the vengeful spirit, the ship fell away. Arabus found himself once more in the ancient stone chamber. "Such discipline," the serpent said, mocking awe in its sibilant tone. "Your eyes are clearer than most of your kind, Arabus. You can see through such falsehoods. Perhaps, then, I should show you a truth?" The room darkened once more, and when the light returned, the sandstone walls remained. So too did the mewling homunculi and the throne. Only the serpent had vanished, and in its place sat a man. He had been vital, this man, but he was dying now, his body broken and ravaged by time. Black blood leaked from his wrists, tapping an endless drip, drip, drip on the stone floor. Channels carved into the stone guided the blood, collecting it in gutters that ran the length of the room. The homunculi bathed in the blood, smearing its darkness over their pale bodies and pulling loose handfuls of it into toothless mouths. One of the creatures dragged itself over to him, hiding its face behind the crook of its arm. In its 2 long-fingered hands, it held a goblet, full to the brim with dark blood. "Drink deep," the serpent said from a place that Arabus could not see. "You have earned this reward." The liquid smelled sweet, like a ripe fruit on a hot day. This man has power to spare. See? He gives it willingly. Take it. Take it for yourself. Erebus saw his own hands cupped around the golden goblet, raising it to his lips to drink. You deserve this. You alone. You have devoted your existence to this cause, and this is your just reward. Drink from the cup. The goblet touched Erebus's mouth, and he could almost taste its contents. Ecstasy and agony, the heights of purest sensation. The serpent appeared, as if from the ether, and coiled around his legs. Arabus could feel its ribs moving under its pastel skin like 1,000 unseen legs. "I grant you my tongue that you may savor this gift," the serpent whispered, euphoria in its voice. Arabus felt the organ flick against his ear, the softest touch of breath on skin. Arabus closed his eyes and opened his new senses, sight, taste, and hearing. As soft as a kiss on the serpent's whisper, he heard a word, a name. He let the goblet fall. Blood spilled across ancient stone, and the blind homunculi squealed in delight, slapping their long tongues against the dusty floor for a taste of the dark nectar. Arabus spun and grabbed the serpent by the throat. It hissed and snapped its long fangs, its body twisting and wriggling as it attempted to strike at the exposed skin of the first chaplain's wrist. He did not let it. "You disappoint me, demon," Arabus said, his new tongue fat and loose in his mouth. "You cannot tempt me with cheap illusions and simple power over such base creatures." He kicked out at the closest homunculus, who scurried away, squealing. "Temptation is your prison, one that I have long since escaped. You ask me what I desire? What I desire is so much more than a creature of your limited capacity could comprehend." "What do you want?" the serpent croaked in his hand, from a mouth that foamed with venom. "Nothing else from you, demon," Arabus said. "You have already given me everything I need." The serpent thrashed in his grasp as he spoke its name, and Arabus let it fall to the floor of the chamber. It died as it hit the ancient stone, its scaled skin turning to paper in a moment, rotting flesh and white bones showing beneath. The same rapid decay afflicted the rest of the temple, as time appeared to accelerate to an impossible speed. The homunculi withered and died, their frail, malformed skeletons turning to dust in front of Arabus's eyes. Even the stone walls of the temple itself fell, worn down by generations of erosion as an epoch passed in a moment. The walls revealed the remnants of the primordial city, its ziggurats and towers already deserted and crumbling. As he watched, they were overrun by the growth of vegetation. The moldering green of moss and creeper plants consumed the dead city until there was no sign of civilization left. This new forest rotted and died at the same terrible pace, its greenery turning soft and brown, decomposing to form layer upon layer of foul mulch. Time slowed, as if finally tiring of its breakneck pace, and Erebus found himself standing knee-deep in an endless swamp. A gray-green fug hung over the stagnant water, its surface only occasionally disturbed by the pops and ripples of the things that lived underneath its filmy surface. Of the city, of the works of sentient hands, there was no sign, just the silence of the grave. And then, in the silence, a ringing sound, a bell. Its chime weak and warped, as if the mist and quiet distorted its music before it could reach his ears. Concentrating hard, he followed the sound, stepping awkwardly through the rancid water until he saw a dim light rise in the gloom. Stepping closer, it coalesced into a shape. A lantern hung from a gnarled branch to the front of a wooden boat. The boat was old, but not as old as its helmswoman. Erebus took the figure for a corpse at first, until its head turned slowly in his direction, milky eyes fixing him with a sightless stare. Her hair was matted and her skin hung loose, like melting tallow from a gray candle. "Lost, are you?" the helmswoman asked. "It's easy to get lost out here, traveler. Come with me. I can give you a place to rest." Her voice was warm and comforting, at odds with her appearance, and he found himself drawn to it. "This place is my test," Arabus said. Hush now, traveler. You must be tired. You have come such a long way. She patted the bench next to her in the boat with gnarled fingers and smiled a toothless grin. With no other options than an eternity in the silent swamp, he hauled his muscled bulk into the boat alongside her. They spoke little as they traveled, settling into an easy silence as the woman paddled Erebus home to her dwelling, a cabin that rose from the swamp on teetering wooden stilts. Its interior was damp, and clumps of quivering moss could be found clinging to several surfaces, but Arabus found it strangely comfortable. He decided he would heed the woman and rest a while before continuing his travels, and he took residence in a spare room with a cot that seemed uniquely designed for his proportions. He fell asleep quickly. When he awoke, the woman was in his room. Her skin was pockmarked with sores that wept a thin yellow liquid. "Did you rest well?" she asked in her warm voice. "I did," Erebus said, and he meant it. His sleep had been so deep, so pure, that it had cleansed his mind of his previous trials, wiping it clean of pain, of anger, of impetus. So deep that he found it difficult to recall how he had arrived in this place. "I came here for a purpose," he said slowly. "It cannot have been important if you have forgotten it," the woman said, a wide smile spreading across her bleeding lips. "Come, drink," she said, and offered a wooden bowl of viscous liquid. Arabus accepted the bowl without question and tipped its contents down his throat. The liquid was as warming as the woman's voice, and he felt his concerns slide away as its effects reached his limbs. Days stretched into weeks before time started to lose meaning. Life developed a routine in the swamp. The woman would wake him with a bowl of her latest concoction before retiring to her kitchen, where she would mix and stir ingredients from her garden for hours on end. Meanwhile, Arabus, requiring sustenance and with little else to do, would hunt for food, preying upon the amphibians that made the swamp their own. They were fat things, their stomachs bloated with thick gas. They popped when he pierced their warty hides, a wet sound that was almost apologetic in the quiet fug of the swamp. The stench of their death was monstrous, but Erebus could not smell it. His once keen olfactory senses dulled for some forgotten reason. He carried the day's kills over his shoulder like trophies. The swollen creature slid mouth first into a branch that he had sharpened with one of the woman's rusted flensing knives. He offered one to her. He always did, but the woman did not eat it. Despite her well-appointed kitchen, and despite the obvious malnourishment of her wasted body, he had never seen food pass her lips. She seemed to appreciate the ingredients that he provided to her, but still she chastised him for his daily toil. "So much effort this hunt. Would you not rest here instead, with me? I would very much enjoy the company." "Even my kind must eat," Arabus said, by way of explanation. But as he spoke the words, he saw the endeavor as the woman did, a waste of time. The air was thick inside the cabin, thicker somehow than the cloud of stinking fog that hung over the bog outside. Breathing was an effort, and his arms felt heavy, even as he slid the fat toads into the woman's cooking pot. "Why fight so hard?" the woman asked, gentleness in her voice. Her jaw hung open now, the gums death black, and the bone of her cheeks was visible through torn skin. Round flies landed inside her mouth as she spoke, lending her voice a buzzing tone. "Give in. Let go." She reached out a skeletal hand, touched him on the forearm, and Erebus fell into soothing darkness. When he awoke, the woman was gone. Her usual pot at her kitchen stove stood empty, and Erebus took the chance to rifle through the cupboards and drawers. They were well stocked, each one rammed with ingredients both fresh and dried, red-bodied worms still wiggling in their bindings, paper-wrapped purple-capped mushrooms that left a yellow creamy substance on his fingers, jars of bloodshot eyeballs that somehow still blinked. He searched through each one, absent-mindedly looking for something that he could not recall. He was prepared to return to his cot when he caught sight of a red mess of a shape in the reflective copper surface of a saucepan hung from a hook on the wall. As he moved, it moved, and he realized that it was his own face. His face, mauled and mutilated, maimed and disfigured. He saw the War Master, his talons red with transhuman blood, and the contentment that filled his soul dissipated. It was replaced by a cold fury. The woman returned a moment later, a crop of mushrooms clutched between her fingers. Arabus maneuvered his bulk to bar her way. "You cannot hold me here, demon," he thundered, staring into her milky eyes. "I do not hold you here," she said, her voice as clear as ever. "You may leave if you have somewhere else to go." You think that I will forget my calling? I am Erebus, the Dark Apostle, the instrument of the gods. Names are meaningless, the woman said. Death carries names beyond remembrance, and death conquers all. On the latter point we agree, Arabus said, and he snapped her neck. She awoke again the next morning, her head now held at an unnatural angle. Arabus struck her down again as she rose, pulverizing her skull with his fists. It did little good. For every time he killed the woman, she returned in the morning with a steaming bowl of viscous liquid, her body suffering the blows without complaint, her temperament as good-humored as the first day they met. His fury turned to resolve. If I am to stay with you, so be it, he said, after countless days of this routine. But please, give me a purpose. Allow me to help you. She smiled, or he thought she did. It was hard to tell in the ruin of her skull. Of course, dear. There are tales told of a plant that grows at the edge of the swamp. Grandfather's children have searched for it, but they have not yet found it. But I warn you, it is impossible to find and impossible to harvest. Only despair waits for you in the marsh. And so he ventured forth, delving deeper and further into the swamp than he had ever before, but finding little more than mutated amphibians or rotting mushrooms. Too often he found himself back at the cabin again. His return to the cabin was always met with apparent kindness from the woman, who was invariably waiting with a bowl of the liquid, but his attempts to ask for guidance were always politely rebuffed. Eventually, he decided to change tack. May I ask a favor? Arabus said. Of course you may, traveler, the woman said, but know that I cannot guide you to your goal. This is yours alone. I understand, Arabus said. I ask only that you grant me your sense of smell. I have come to understand that I may remain in this place for eternity, and would like to be granted this simple boon to truly make the swamp my home. The woman considered the request for a long moment before nodding her rotting head. Of course, my dear, she said, a motherly tone in her voice. It's the least I can do. A revitalized sense of smell allowed him to approach his task with renewed vigor. He let new aromas guide him, finding new ingredients for the woman, but failing in his task of finding the apocryphal plant. On one such jaunt, his attention was captured by an old scent, one from his distant memory. It was a wisp of a thing, dry, like dust, and artificial, strange in this world of slow death. Arabus tracked it to the base of a knotted tree, pulling at bracken to reveal the source of the smell. Under moss and dirt, beneath dead leaves and dying wood, Arabus uncovered a well. It was built from bricks, their edges rounded with age, and he wasn't sure if it was still functional, but as he slid the metal covering back, he saw the reflection of his mutilated face staring back at him in clear water. He reached in and cupped a hand of that water to his mouth. It was fresh, cold and sweet, a sliver of purity in a tainted land. He filled a canteen with the water and returned to the cabin. When the woman appeared with her own liquid, Arabus rejected it, drinking deep from the well water instead. The sight of it made the woman screech in fear. What is it? She howled. Water, Arabus said. No! She screamed. It's poison! He turned the canteen over in his hands, watched as the woman recoiled in fear. He allowed a drop of the water to fall from the canteen's cap, watching intently as it fizzed and popped against the slime-green floor. As the smoke cleared, Arabus saw a tiny circle of brown amongst the green. The rotten wood returned to health. The woman cowered in the corner of her hovel, a shivering corpse of a creature made somehow more pitiful. Arabus laughed. Now, demon, it's your turn to drink. He took the demon in his hands and pulled open the ruin of its jaw before pouring the rest of the water down its throat. Erebus returned to the well often, filling his canteen and other containers that he brought from the woman's house. Some of the water he kept for himself, but more he fed to the demon, forcing it down the creature's throat until she grew healthy and vital. The woman's skin tightened, her eyes cleared, and her injuries healed. All the while she wept and wailed, promising his slow death at the hands of time and disease. Eventually, she resorted to begging. Please, the woman said, through full lips. Her eyes were green, the color of new saplings in the springtime. They welled with tears even as she spoke. Deliver me from this misery. Tell me your name, Arabus said. Anything but that. Erebus raised its canteen and tipped the well water over the woman. The clear liquid smelled fresh and cool, conspicuous in its difference to the rest of the cabin. Her terrified screams disturbed the silence of the swamp. "I relent!" the woman gasped after months, years of agony. Erebus had long ago lost track of time. Her dark skin shone, beautiful in the pale light of the small room. "I will tell you. Please, stop this torture." She was good to her word, and as Arabus spoke the name, the thick mist began to lighten, and the swamp fell away. As darkness once more descended, the smell of the accursed place, the rotting, cloying damp of decay and death, slowly faded from his nostrils. Arabus fell from the font, gasping for breath. As he regulated his intake of air, his twin hearts slowing in tempo, he heard the steady drip of blood falling from his skull to the stone floor of his ritual chamber. He brought his hands upwards, feeling at the meat of his face, and found a shifting, squirming mass of flesh. He rose and called to his acolytes, "Mirror!" A hooded figure returned with a jewel-embedded mirror, its silver handle carved with runes. Erebus looked into its depths and saw the reward of his trials, not just the services of powerful allies, but the power of the Four, represented in the visage of one. He had seen this before, as a child, in the deserts of Colchis. Now that prophecy had come true. Eyes that could see futures yet to pass. Ears that rang with the beat of the blood god's war drums. A mouth that ached for the rarest tastes. A nose for death in all its forms. With his new face, Arabus smiled. Okay, so that was it. He had to claim the power, but he has a new demon face of chaos undivided, essentially. We'll have to see what he does with it, but it was nice to see Erebus in a story where he wasn't shanking one of my favorite characters. So now, how is it that this guy keeps claiming new power, keeps climbing the ladder, keeps enduring despite all the havoc and destruction he's caused? I, for one, liked this story and thought it was fun, especially to read during Halloween season. I thought it really took away everything behind Horus flaying his face off, and so in that way it was actually very grimdark. Not to the character Erebus, but to we, the readers. It took our hope away. That glimmer of light that we got, the joy of seeing that total dickbag Erebus suffer and lose so much, that's not only all gone now, but he's actually gotten an upgrade with super demon-infused senses now. If anybody deserved that less, I'm hard-pressed to find them. I don't know what makes me hate him most now. Between the Horus heresy, the end in the death, the era of ruin, and now this short story, it may just be this one, Visage, because simply, he turns his losses into wins by being a slimy worm. Anyway, that's just my thoughts. Let me know if you're an Erebus fan. Yes, they do exist. How this one sits with you. And remember, kids, that knowing might be half the battle, but the other half is violence of action.